She vanished on the one day she was supposed to be celebrating her 9th birthday. There was no break-in. No abductor in the night. No frantic ransom demand. Because the person who took her was her own mother. A routine custody visit over 4th of July weekend turned into a disappearance that would last nearly 6 years. One moment she was a normal child in suburban Illinois. The next, she was gone without a trace. Police searched across state lines. Her father waited for answers that never came. And year after year, her face aged in missing child posters. Then in 2023, a single moment shattered the silence. A teenager stepped into public view, and someone realized the truth. The missing girl wasn't gone. She'd been hidden. This is the chilling true story of Kayla Unbehaun, a child taken by the one person she trusted most. Before we dive into the depths of this heartbreaking case, if you're passionate about uncovering the truth and bringing missing children home, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us shed light on cases that deserve answers. Like this video if you believe every missing child deserves a voice, and share it with someone who cares about these stories. Together, we can make a difference. Imagine a little girl celebrating the 4th of July with fireworks, parades, and family time, only for that ordinary holiday to become the start of a 6-year mystery that would grip the nation. This is the true story of Kayla Unbehaun, a case where a routine custody visit turned into one of the most talked about parental abductions in recent years. But how did it begin? And how did it finally end? Let's go back to the suburbs of Chicago in 2017. In the western suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, a young girl named Kayla Unbehaun lived what appeared to be an ordinary childhood, until family court decisions changed the course of her life. Kayla was born on July 5, 2008, to parents Ryan Iserka and Heather Unbehaun. The couple eventually separated, leading to ongoing disputes over custody and visitation rights for their daughter. Court records from Kane County, Illinois, show that the parents initially operated under informal arrangements for Kayla's care. However, disagreements arose over parenting responsibilities, visitation schedules, and other matters related to Kayla's upbringing. These weren't simple misunderstandings between two people trying to co-parent. These were fundamental disagreements about how Kayla should be raised, where she should live, and who should make decisions about her future. Ryan Iserka reported that Heather Unbehaun relocated with Kayla to Georgia at one point without prior agreement or notification regarding a new visitation plan. Imagine being a parent and discovering that your child has been moved to another state without your knowledge or consent. He stated that he became aware of the move through a phone conversation with Kayla herself. Not through proper legal channels, not through a courtesy call from his ex-partner, but from his own daughter, who was caught in the middle of an increasingly contentious situation. These issues prompted Ryan Iserka to seek formal legal intervention. When informal arrangements break down and trust erodes, the law becomes the only mediator. He filed petitions for structured visitation rights and child support, asking the court system to establish clear boundaries and expectations that both parents would be legally obligated to follow. Over several years, the case progressed through the Kane County court system. Hearings addressed concerns about compliance with court orders, including matters related to Kayla's medical care, health, and overall well-being. These weren't quick proceedings. This was years of legal battles, years of uncertainty for a young girl who just wanted stability, years of documentation and testimony and evidence presented before judges who had to make decisions that would fundamentally shape this child's life. By early 2017, a judge ruled in favor of Ryan Iserka, granting him full legal and physical custody of Kayla. This wasn't a decision made lightly. Family courts generally favor shared custody arrangements and work to maintain relationships between children and both parents whenever possible. For a court to grant full custody to one parent means that significant evidence was presented demonstrating that such an arrangement was in the child's best interest. This decision was based on findings that Heather Unbehaun had not consistently followed previous court directives concerning custody and related obligations. Court orders aren't suggestions. They're legal mandates that carry the weight of law, and violations can have serious consequences. The judge's ruling indicated a pattern of non-compliance, a history of not following the rules that had been established to protect Kayla's welfare. As a result, Heather Unbehaun was awarded unsupervised parenting time, which allowed her scheduled visits with Kayla. Despite losing primary custody, she wasn't cut off from her daughter entirely. The court recognized that maintaining a relationship with both parents was important, and Heather was given regular opportunities to spend time with Kayla. These visits included every other weekend and specific holiday periods as outlined in the parenting plan approved by the court. At the time of the 2017 custody order, Kayla was 8 years old, turning 9. She was at an age where she understood what was happening around her, where she could form her own opinions and feelings about the situation, but still young enough to need the stability and security that parental consistency provides. She resided primarily with her father, Ryan Iserka, in South Elgin, Illinois, a quiet suburb northwest of Chicago. South Elgin is the kind of community where families put down roots, where children ride bikes through neighborhoods and parents know their neighbors. It's a place that offers the illusion of safety, the kind of place where you don't expect a child to vanish on her birthday. Heather Unbehaun lived in Wheaton, Illinois, approximately 15 miles away. Close enough for regular visits, close enough to remain part of Kayla's daily life if she chose to follow the court order, but far enough to maintain separate households and separate lives. The arrangement permitted Heather to have Kayla for designated blocks of time, including over extended holiday weekends. These longer visits gave mother and daughter opportunities to create memories, to maintain their bond, to have experiences that went beyond brief afternoon visits. One such period was the 4th of July holiday in 2017. The Independence Day weekend fell on a Tuesday, July 4th that year, providing an opportunity for families to celebrate with parades, barbecues, and outdoor activities. It's a quintessentially American holiday, a time when communities come together to celebrate freedom and independence. The irony of what would happen on this particular Independence Day weekend would not be lost on anyone following this case. Under the existing parenting time order, Heather Unbehaun was permitted to have Kayla during this holiday. This was her scheduled time, her legal right to spend this celebration with her daughter. There was nothing unusual about the arrangement. It was simply another court-ordered visit, another opportunity for mother and daughter to be together. On July 4, 2017, Kayla traveled to her mother's residence in Wheaton for the scheduled visitation. Ryan Iserka understood that Kayla would spend the holiday with her mother, and that the exchange back to his custody was set for the following day, July 5, 2017, which coincided with Kayla's 9th birthday. Think about that timing for a moment. Kayla would celebrate the 4th of July with her mother, then return to her father's home on her actual birthday. It was a split celebration, a compromise that many children of divorced parents experience. She would have fireworks and parades with one parent, then birthday cake and presents with the other. It wasn't ideal, but it was the reality of her situation. Family members and court documents later confirmed that Kayla was last known to be in her mother's care on that 4th of July date. Activities reportedly included attending a local parade in Wheaton, as was common for the holiday in the area. Wheaton, like many Chicago suburbs, has a traditional small-town parade on Independence Day, with floats and marching bands and local politicians waving from convertibles. It's wholesome, it's American, it's the kind of event that creates childhood memories. No public indications suggested any immediate concern at that moment. To anyone watching, this was simply a mother and daughter enjoying a holiday together. There were no red flags, no signs of distress, no warnings of what was about to unfold. The visitation appeared to proceed according to the court-ordered schedule. Everything seemed normal, routine, unremarkable. But beneath the surface, something was being planned. Decisions were being made that would change lives forever. And as the fireworks exploded in the night sky over Wheaton, Illinois, on that 4th of July evening, time was running out for anyone to prevent what was about to happen. The morning of July 5, 2017, began as an expected routine for Ryan Iserka. It was his daughter Kayla's 9th birthday, a milestone that should have been filled with joy and celebration. According to the court-ordered parenting plan, Heather Unbehaun was required to return Kayla to his custody that day. This wasn't optional, this wasn't flexible. This was a legal obligation with specific times and expectations clearly outlined in court documents. Following the 4th of July holiday visitation, Ryan Iserka drove to Heather Unbehaun's residence in Wheaton, Illinois, at the prearranged time to pick up Kayla. He likely had plans for the day, a birthday celebration prepared, presents wrapped, perhaps a cake waiting at home. He was coming to collect his daughter so they could celebrate her 9th year of life together. When he arrived, neither Heather nor Kayla was present. Imagine that moment. You arrive to pick up your child, expecting to see her run to your car with excitement about her birthday, and instead you find an empty house. The silence where there should be laughter. The absence where there should be presence. The first stirrings of concern that something isn't right. He contacted family members who lived nearby and learned that Heather had told them she was taking Kayla on a camping trip in Wisconsin over the holiday weekend. This explanation would have made sense on the surface. Camping over a long weekend is a normal summer activity. Wisconsin is close enough to make it a reasonable destination. But the problem was that this camping trip wasn't part of the court-ordered schedule, and more importantly, it was supposed to be over by now. They expected Heather and Kayla to return to Wheaton that evening so the exchange could take place as scheduled. The family members weren't concerned yet. They believed Heather was simply running late, that perhaps the drive back from Wisconsin was taking longer than expected, that mother and daughter would appear soon and the custody exchange would happen, just a few hours behind schedule. However, by the end of the day, neither mother nor daughter had returned. Hours passed. The afternoon turned to evening. The evening turned to night. And still no word from Heather. Still no sign of Kayla. Ryan Iserka's concern grew into alarm, and alarm grew into the sickening realization that something was very wrong. His daughter's 9th birthday was ending, and he hadn't seen her. He hadn't been able to wish her happy birthday in person, hadn't been able to give her the celebration she deserved. And more troubling than the missed birthday was the unavoidable question, where were they? Concerned, Ryan Iserka immediately contacted the South Elgin Police Department to report that his daughter had not been returned as required by the custody order. He also filed a missing persons report for both Kayla and Heather Unbehaun. This was no longer a case of parents disagreeing about pickup times. This was a potential crime in progress. A court order had been violated, and a child was unaccounted for. The police began an initial investigation and classified the situation as a possible parental abduction, given the existing court order granting Ryan full custody and specifying the exact times for visitation exchanges. The law is clear on this point: when a non-custodial parent fails to return a child as required by a court order, it constitutes abduction, regardless of the biological relationship between the parent and child. Officers visited Heather's residence in Wheaton and spoke with family members. They learned that Heather had packed a significant amount of clothing, personal items, and other belongings into her vehicle before leaving with Kayla on July 4th. This detail is crucial. You don't pack significant amounts of clothing and personal belongings for a short camping trip. You pack a backpack, some sleeping bags, basic supplies. But significant amounts suggest preparation for a longer absence, suggest planning rather than spontaneity. There was no indication that the trip was intended to be a short camping outing. The evidence was mounting that this had never been about a camping trip at all. This had been a cover story, an explanation designed to prevent alarm while Heather put distance between herself and the jurisdiction of the Illinois courts. Bank records later showed that Heather had withdrawn a substantial amount of cash in the days leading up to the holiday. Again, this is a critical detail. Cash withdrawals leave a trail, but cash transactions don't. If you're planning to disappear, you don't use credit cards that can be tracked with every purchase. You don't use debit cards that ping location data with every transaction. You withdraw cash, and you use only cash, making yourself as invisible as possible to anyone trying to follow your movements. On July 6, 2017, the Kane County State's Attorney's Office issued a felony warrant for Heather Unbehaun's arrest, charging her with child abduction under Illinois law, 720 ILCS 5/10-5, a Class 4 felony at the time. This moved the case from a custody dispute into the realm of criminal law. Heather Unbehaun was now a wanted fugitive, and every law enforcement officer in the state of Illinois had legal authority to arrest her on sight. Kayla Unbehaun was officially listed as a missing child. Her information, along with a recent photograph, was entered into the National Crime Information Center, the NCIC database, which is accessible to law enforcement agencies nationwide. This database is a critical tool in missing persons cases. Every time a police officer runs a license plate, checks an ID, or investigates any matter that requires accessing law enforcement databases, any hits on missing persons entries are immediately flagged. The case was also reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, known as NCMEC. This organization has been instrumental in recovering missing children since its founding in 1983. NCMEC assigned the case number 1194337 and created a public profile for Kayla. The profile included a photograph of Kayla taken shortly before her disappearance, showing a 9-year-old girl with brown hair and brown eyes. Look at that photograph if you can find it online. Look at the face of a child who was about to lose years of her life, who was about to become a fugitive through no choice of her own, who was about to have her entire identity erased and rebuilt by an adult's desperate decisions. The profile also included an age-progressed image estimating how Kayla might look at older ages. These images are created by forensic artists who use specialized software and knowledge of how facial features change over time to predict what a missing child might look like years after their disappearance. They're not perfect, but they've been crucial in generating tips and recognition in long-term missing persons cases. Details of the abduction were included, specifically that she had been taken by her non-custodial mother, Heather Unbehaun. The profile provided a physical description of Heather Unbehaun, approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, 140 to 150 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes. These details would be distributed to law enforcement, to media outlets, to anyone who might encounter this woman and child. The profile also included a description of the vehicle Heather was believed to be driving, a silver 2006 Pontiac G6. Vehicle descriptions are often as important as physical descriptions of suspects. A car is harder to disguise than a person. You can change your hair color and style in an hour, but changing a vehicle's appearance requires time, resources, and skill. The vehicle became one of the most important pieces of information in the search for Kayla. NCMEC classified the case as a family abduction and distributed posters and alerts through its network of partners, including law enforcement agencies, media outlets, and community organizations. Family abductions are the most common type of child abduction, but they're not less serious because a parent is involved. In fact, they can be more complex and more damaging because they involve a fundamental betrayal of trust and often result in children being moved frequently, having their identities changed, and being cut off from half of their family and their entire former life. In the days following the disappearance, Ryan Iserka made public statements expressing deep concern for his daughter's safety. He told local news reporters that he had no indication Heather intended to take Kayla permanently and that he hoped she would return soon. His words carried the weight of a father's desperation, the pain of not knowing where his child was sleeping at night, whether she was safe, whether she was scared, whether she understood what was happening to her. He also began sharing Kayla's photograph and information on social media, asking for the public's help in locating her. Social media has become an invaluable tool in missing persons cases. Information can spread across the country in hours, reaching millions of people who might see something, notice something, remember something that could break a case wide open. Local media in the Chicago area picked up the story, running initial reports about the missing child and the outstanding warrant for the mother. The South Elgin Police Department, working with the Illinois State Police and other agencies, followed up on possible leads, including checking campgrounds in Wisconsin and monitoring known addresses associated with Heather Unbehaun. The Wisconsin camping trip story was the last known piece of information about their intended destination, so it made sense to start there. Officers contacted campgrounds across southern Wisconsin, showing photographs of Heather and Kayla, asking if anyone remembered seeing them. They checked registration records, reviewed any available security footage, interviewed campground staff and visitors who might have been there over the 4th of July weekend. However, no confirmed sightings were reported in the immediate weeks after July 5. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. No one recognized them, no one remembered seeing the silver Pontiac, no one had any information that could advance the investigation. The trail was already growing cold. By late July 2017, the investigation had expanded. Authorities determined that Heather Unbehaun had not used her cell phone or credit cards after July 4, suggesting she may have been deliberately avoiding electronic tracking. This confirmed what investigators already suspected. This wasn't a spontaneous decision, this wasn't a mother who impulsively decided to extend a camping trip by a few days. This was planned, calculated, and executed with an understanding of how modern technology can track people's movements. Think about how difficult it is to function in modern society without using a cell phone or credit cards. Think about all the transactions we make every day that leave digital footprints. Buying gas, buying food, paying for lodging, making phone calls, sending text messages. Heather had essentially gone dark, which meant she was either using only cash for everything or had found someone willing to help her, someone whose cards and phone could be used while hers stayed silent. The silver Pontiac G6 was also not located in any public parking areas or traffic camera footage near Wheaton or South Elgin. Traffic cameras and automated license plate readers have become increasingly common tools in law enforcement. They capture images of every license plate that passes, creating a searchable database of vehicle movements. But the Pontiac never appeared. Either it had been abandoned, sold, or hidden somewhere beyond the reach of these automated systems. Ryan Iserka set up a GoFundMe page titled, "Bring Kayla Home," to raise funds for awareness efforts, private investigators, and any reward that might encourage tips. When cases go cold, when official investigations slow down due to lack of leads, families often turn to private resources. Private investigators can dedicate time and attention to a single case in ways that overstretched police departments sometimes cannot. But these services cost money, as do printing and distributing flyers, running social media campaigns, and offering rewards for information. He posted regular updates on the page, sharing Kayla's birthday messages and expressing his hope that she was safe. Imagine writing birthday messages to a daughter you can't find, hoping somehow they reach her, hoping she knows you haven't forgotten her, you haven't stopped looking, you haven't given up. Each birthday that would pass, July 5, 2018, July 5, 2019, July 5, 2020, July 5, 2021, July 5, 2022, would be another year of Kayla's childhood lost, another candle on a cake she wouldn't see, another celebration that happened without her. Family and friends helped distribute flyers in the Chicago suburbs and surrounding areas. These grassroots efforts are the backbone of many missing persons searches. Volunteers spending their weekends papering neighborhoods with flyers, asking businesses to post them in windows, handing them out at community events, doing anything they can to keep the case visible, to keep people looking, to keep hope alive that someone, somewhere, will see something that matters. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Cold Case Model, because cases like this need attention, they need awareness, and they need people like you who care enough to watch until the end. Despite these efforts, the trail went cold within the first few months. Kayla and Heather Unbehaun remained missing, and the felony warrant stayed active. The case transitioned from an active search for a child who might have been taken on an extended unauthorized trip to a longer-term missing child investigation. This is when cases become statistics, when the urgent immediate response begins to fade, when investigators have to divide their attention among newer cases while still keeping files open on the unsolved ones. The reality of missing persons investigations is that most cases are solved quickly or not at all. The first 48 hours are critical. After that, the odds of recovery drop dramatically. After weeks, the chances are slim. After months, families begin to prepare themselves for the possibility that they may never know what happened, may never see their loved one again. But Ryan Iserka didn't give up. He continued his social media presence, continued updating the GoFundMe page, continued doing interviews with any media outlet that would give him airtime. He understood that the only way to keep the case alive was to keep it visible, to keep people aware that somewhere out there, his daughter was missing, and someone might know something. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children continued to update Kayla's case file, creating new age-progressed images as years passed. At age 10, at age 11, at age 12, at age 13, at age 14, artists created images showing how Kayla might look as she grew older, hoping that someone would see one of these images and recognize the girl they knew by a different name, living a different life. Because that's what happens in long-term family abduction cases. Children are given new names, new identities, new backstories. They're enrolled in schools under false information. They're taught to lie about their past, to never mention their other parent, to keep the secret of who they really are. Some children are too young when taken to remember their previous life. Others remember but are told that their other parent didn't want them, didn't love them, gave them up willingly. The psychological damage of family abduction is profound and long-lasting. These children grow up in a state of constant instability, knowing at some level that their entire life is built on a lie, unable to trust the parent who took them because that parent has demonstrated a willingness to violate laws and norms to get what they want. They're cut off from half their family, from grandparents and cousins and siblings, from everyone who knew them before. The years passed. 2017 turned to 2018, then 2019, then 2020. Each year brought new challenges, a global pandemic that made in-person searching even more difficult, social movements that dominated news cycles and pushed missing children's stories further down the priority list, budget cuts to law enforcement agencies that meant fewer resources for cold cases. But through it all, Kayla's case remained open. The felony warrant remained active. Ryan Iserka remained determined. And somewhere, under a different name in a different state, Kayla Unbehaun was growing up, missing years of her life that she would never get back, experiencing a childhood that should never have been stolen from her. 2020 turned to 2021, then 2022, then 2023. Nearly 6 years had passed since that 4th of July weekend when Kayla disappeared. She was no longer the 9-year-old girl in the photographs that circulated online and on missing persons posters. She was now a teenager, 14 years old, experiencing adolescence under circumstances that no child should have to endure. Ryan Iserka marked each birthday with public posts, each holiday with renewed pleas for information, each anniversary of her disappearance with updated age-progressed images and desperate hope that this would be the year she came home. The pain of not knowing never lessened. If anything, it grew more acute with time, as he missed milestone after milestone in his daughter's life. Law enforcement agencies continued to follow leads as they came in, though they became fewer and farther between as the years stretched on. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children kept Kayla's case active, updating their files, creating new materials, ensuring that her face remained visible to the public. Tips came in sporadically, each one investigated thoroughly, each one ultimately leading nowhere. And then, in 2023, something changed. The break in the case came not from a dramatic police investigation or a high-profile media appeal, but from something far more mundane, a routine interaction that triggered an alert in the system that had been waiting nearly 6 years to be activated. In 2023, authorities in North Carolina received information that led them to a residence where Heather Unbehaun and Kayla were living. The details of exactly what triggered the investigation vary in public reports, some sources indicating it was a tip from someone who recognized them, others suggesting it was a routine check that revealed inconsistencies in identification or school enrollment documents. What matters is that after nearly 6 years of searching, after thousands of tips and leads and dead ends, investigators finally had a confirmed location. When officers arrived at the residence to execute the warrant for Heather Unbehaun's arrest, they found both mother and daughter. Kayla, now 14 years old, was alive and physically unharmed. She had been living under a different name, attending school under false documentation, completely cut off from her father and the life she had known in Illinois. The moment of recovery in family abduction cases is complex. This wasn't a rescue from a dangerous kidnapper. This was a daughter being separated from the mother she had been living with for nearly 6 years, the mother who had been her only parent and constant companion through crucial developmental years. Regardless of the illegality of the situation, regardless of the pain caused to Ryan Iserka and others, Kayla had bonded with her mother during those years, had built a life, had adapted to her circumstances. Heather Unbehaun was immediately taken into custody on the outstanding felony warrant from Illinois. She was charged with child abduction and would face extradition back to Kane County to answer for the charges that had been filed against her in July 2017. The wheels of justice that had been waiting for nearly 6 years could finally begin to turn. For Ryan Iserka, the news that Kayla had been found alive brought overwhelming relief mixed with complicated emotions. His daughter was safe, she was alive, she was coming home. But she was also no longer the 9-year-old he had last seen on July 4, 2017. She was a teenager who had spent her formative years being told who knows what about why she wasn't with her father, about why they had to hide, about what her life was supposed to be. The reunion between Ryan Iserka and Kayla was private, kept away from media cameras and public scrutiny, as it should be. The details of that moment, the emotions of seeing each other after nearly 6 years, the questions that needed to be asked and answered, the rebuilding of trust and relationship that would need to happen, all of that belonged to them and them alone. What we do know is that Kayla was returned to her father's custody, as mandated by the original court order that had never been revoked or changed. She was back in Illinois, back in the state where she was born, back with the father who had never stopped looking for her. But coming home after 6 years is not the same as never having left. Too much time had passed. Too much had changed. The psychological impact of family abduction on children is well documented by researchers and mental health professionals who work with recovered victims. These children face unique challenges that require specialized therapeutic intervention. They've lived for years with one version of reality, only to discover that much of what they believed about their life was false. They've been isolated from half of their family, prevented from knowing grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings who loved them and wanted to be part of their lives. For Kayla, the recovery meant processing 6 years of deception. It meant understanding that the camping trip she thought she was going on in July 2017 had actually been the beginning of a planned disappearance. It meant learning that her father hadn't abandoned her or stopped wanting her, but had been desperately searching for her. It meant reconciling her feelings for her mother, who she had lived with and depended on, with the knowledge that her mother had committed a serious crime. This is where the complexity of family abduction becomes most apparent. Kayla likely still loved her mother, despite everything. Children don't stop loving their parents simply because those parents make terrible choices. But she also had to process anger, betrayal, confusion about why this happened to her, grief for the years she lost with her father and the rest of her family. Reintegration required professional help. Therapists who specialize in family abduction cases understand that these situations require careful, patient work. You can't simply place a child back in their previous life and expect them to adjust immediately. There needs to be space for the child to express their feelings, to ask questions, to work through the trauma of what they've experienced. For Ryan Iserka, there was also therapeutic work to be done. The pain of 6 years of not knowing where his daughter was, the helplessness of being unable to protect her, the anger at Heather Unbehaun for stealing those years, all of that needed to be processed in healthy ways that wouldn't burden Kayla with guilt or force her to choose between her parents emotionally. The legal process for Heather Unbehaun moved forward in the Illinois court system. She faced the Class 4 felony charge of child abduction that had been filed in July 2017. The prosecution had substantial evidence, the court order granting Ryan Iserka full custody, documentation of the scheduled visitation exchange that never happened, proof that Heather had deliberately fled with Kayla and remained in hiding for nearly 6 years. The question wasn't whether Heather Unbehaun had committed the crime. The evidence was clear. The question was what justice should look like in this case. What sentence would be appropriate for a mother who took her daughter and hid for 6 years, depriving the child of her father and extended family, forcing her to live under a false identity, but who by all accounts had kept the child physically safe and cared for during that time. Some people argue that parental abduction should carry lighter sentences than stranger abduction because the child is with a parent who presumably loves them. Others argue that the sentence should be harsh because the betrayal of trust is deeper when a parent violates court orders and teaches their child that laws are optional and dishonesty is acceptable. The courts ultimately had to balance these considerations. They had to consider the impact on Kayla, who regardless of the appropriateness of punishment for her mother, would be affected by whatever sentence was handed down. They had to consider the message sent to other parents who might be considering similar actions. They had to consider the years of pain inflicted on Ryan Iserka and others who loved Kayla. Public records of Heather Unbehaun's ultimate sentence and the terms of her punishment are part of the legal record in Kane County, though out of respect for Kayla's privacy, many details of the case have been kept from public view. What matters most is not the specific punishment given to Heather Unbehaun, but rather the message sent by her prosecution, that parental abduction is a serious crime with serious consequences, that court orders must be followed, and that children have a right to relationships with both parents unless there are compelling safety reasons to prevent it. For the broader community of missing children advocates, law enforcement professionals, and families dealing with similar situations, Kayla's case provided both hope and hard lessons. The hope came from her safe recovery. After nearly 6 years missing, she was found alive and returned to her father's custody. This reminds us that missing children cases should never be closed prematurely, that continuing to investigate and keeping cases visible matters, that someone somewhere might have the information that breaks a case wide open. The hard lessons came from understanding how Heather Unbehaun managed to remain hidden for so long. She had avoided using electronic communications and financial instruments that could be tracked. She had presumably established a new identity for herself and Kayla, obtaining documents under false pretenses. She had likely received help from others who either didn't know the full situation or chose to assist her despite knowing she was violating a court order. This case highlighted vulnerabilities in the systems designed to track and locate missing children. It showed how someone determined to disappear can do so, at least for a time, if they're willing to completely abandon their previous life and live in the margins of society. It demonstrated the need for better information sharing between states, better verification of identity documents, better training for school officials and others who might encounter children living under false identities. But perhaps most importantly, Kayla's case reminded us of the human cost of these legal and systemic failures. This wasn't just a case number or a statistic. This was a real child who lost 6 years of her life, who missed her father and extended family, who was forced to live a lie throughout her childhood and early adolescence. This was a father who spent 6 years not knowing if his daughter was alive or dead, safe or in danger. This was a family that will spend years healing from wounds that should never have been inflicted. As of 2023, Kayla Unbehaun was back home with her father in Illinois. She was attending school, presumably under her real name for the first time in 6 years. She was reconnecting with family members who had been cut out of her life since she was 9 years old. She was working through the complex emotions and trauma of her experience with professional help. She was, slowly and painfully, rebuilding a life that had been stolen from her. Her story is both tragic and hopeful. Tragic because of what was taken from her and can never be returned. Hopeful because she was found alive, because she has the opportunity to heal and grow and build relationships with all of her family, because the rest of her life is ahead of her and not lost to continued hiding and deception. The question that haunts this case is the same question that haunts all family abduction cases: what was Heather Unbehaun thinking? What reasoning, what justification, what desperation led her to take such drastic action? Did she believe she was protecting Kayla from something? Did she simply refuse to accept the court's decision about custody? Did she convince herself that her love for her daughter gave her the right to take her, regardless of what the law said? We may never fully know the answers to these questions. What we do know is that on July 4, 2017, a mother made a choice that would have rippling consequences for years to come. She chose to violate a court order. She chose to take her daughter and disappear. She chose to make herself a fugitive and her daughter a victim of family abduction. And the consequences of that choice affected not just the immediate family, but everyone who searched for Kayla, everyone who cared about her case, everyone who wondered for 6 years if she would ever be found. Kayla's safe recovery in 2023 brought closure to one chapter of this story, but opened another. The chapter of recovery, of healing, of rebuilding what was broken and creating new relationships and trust. This chapter will take years to fully write, and it belongs to Kayla and her family to write in private, away from public scrutiny. What we can say from the outside is that family abduction is a serious crime with devastating consequences that last long beyond the moment of recovery. We can say that the family court system exists for a reason, and that parents who disagree with custody decisions have legal options for appeal and modification that don't involve fleeing with their children. We can say that children are not property to be possessed, but human beings with their own rights to know their family, to have stability, to live without the burden of secrets and lies. We can also say that every case of a missing child matters, that every family deserves answers, and that we should never stop looking until every missing child is found. Kayla Unbehaun was one of the lucky ones. She was found alive. She was returned to her father's custody. She has the rest of her life ahead of her. But there are still thousands of missing children whose cases remain unsolved, whose families are still waiting for answers, who deserve the same effort and attention that helped bring Kayla home. This case is a reminder that persistence matters in missing persons investigations. Ryan Iserka never stopped looking for his daughter. Law enforcement never closed her case. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children kept her profile active and updated. Social media kept her story visible. And all of those efforts, combined with whatever specific circumstances led to the break in the case in 2023, resulted in Kayla's recovery. It's also a reminder that family matters. Extended family members who kept Kayla in their hearts for 6 years, who helped distribute flyers and share information, who supported Ryan Iserka through the darkest times. Friends who stood by the family, who refused to let Kayla be forgotten. Community members who cared about a child they might never have met but whose story touched their hearts. All of these people played a role in keeping Kayla's case alive until she could be found. The story of Kayla Unbehaun is ultimately a story about love, loss, and the long road to recovery. It's about a father's love for his daughter that never wavered despite years of separation. It's about the loss of precious time that can never be recovered. And it's about the difficult process of healing after trauma, of rebuilding trust, of moving forward into a future that can never erase the past but can be shaped into something better than what was stolen. For anyone watching this who is dealing with a missing family member, Kayla's story offers both hope and a reminder of the importance of never giving up. Hope because she was found alive after nearly 6 years. A reminder because it took 6 years of constant effort, constant visibility, constant pressure to keep the case active before that breakthrough came. For anyone watching this who is considering violating a custody order or taking a child to avoid a court decision, Kayla's story is a warning. The harm caused by family abduction is real and lasting. The legal consequences are serious. And the damage to your relationship with your child, once they understand what you've done and why, may be irreparable. There are legal ways to modify custody arrangements if circumstances change. Taking a child and fleeing is not the answer. This case remains a powerful example of why we need continued investment in systems and resources for finding missing children. We need better technology for tracking and locating abducted children. We need better training for professionals who might encounter children living under false identities. We need better coordination between states and jurisdictions. We need more public awareness about family abduction and its consequences. And we need continued funding for organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that do this critical work. Kayla Unbehaun's story doesn't end with her recovery in 2023. In many ways, that's where the most important part of her story begins. The part where she reclaims her identity, heals from her trauma, builds relationships with her family, and moves forward into a future of her own choosing. That story is hers to write, and we can only hope that it's filled with healing, growth, and the peace that was stolen from her for too many years. If you've made it this far in this video, thank you for caring enough about Kayla's story to listen to the details, to understand the complexity, to recognize that this isn't just another true crime story for entertainment. This is a real child whose life was disrupted, a real family that was torn apart, and a real crime that was eventually solved, leading to recovery and the long process of healing. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on this case. Share this video with others who care about missing children and family abduction issues. Subscribe to Cold Case Model so you can stay updated on cases like this that need visibility and attention. Your engagement with this content isn't just about views and likes. It's about keeping awareness high around missing children, supporting families going through these terrible experiences, and reminding everyone that these cases matter, these children matter, and we should never stop looking until every missing child is found and brought home. Thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and thank you for being part of the community that believes every child deserves to be found. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop seeking the truth.